ago, we as Native people are connected by our relationship to land, to one another, but also the violent histories that have attempted to strip us of our humanity. Importantly, this event today is inextricably connected to why we invite you to practice reflexivity on your own relationships to Indigenous people, both locally and globally. As we learn more about anti-Blackness, I invite you to connect and reflect on the relationships between anti-Blackness and anti-Indigeneity and the interwoven powers of settler colonialism and white supremacy. Ask yourself, why am I here? How can I be here? The answer will vary based on your intersections of identity, and I call you to reflect on those answers and your relationship to Black and Indigenous and Afro-Indigenous folks and the responsibilities that come along with those relationships. Our liberations are bound together, and where do you fall in that work? If you would like to read more of what CU does to honor its Native community, the official land acknowledgement can be found on the website, and I will also link it here in the chat. And I'll also be putting a few links for allyship, for kind of developing your connection to Native communities and your knowledge of Native communities in the chat as well.
Thank you so much, Lila. My name is Marisha Lopez. I am the program manager for the Office for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And I have the honor of introducing you all to Dr. Alana Simmons. Since February 2019, Dr. Alana Simmons has served as the Gear Up Director for the Dougherty County School System in Georgia. Additionally, she is a lecturer in business in the School of Business, Economics, and Technology at King University in Bristol, Tennessee. Prior to this role, Dr. Simmons served as the Sexual Violence Prevention Coordinator and Adjunct Professor at Emory and Henry College in Emory, Virginia. She has more than 10 years of instructional experience, which includes providing supportive services to system-impacted students. Dr. Simmons holds a PhD in post-secondary and adult education from Capella University, a master's in public administration and human resource management from Troy University, and an undergraduate degree in criminal justice from Georgia State University. Her research interests include teacher preparation for correctional educators, amplifying servant leadership opportunities for system impacted students, and the role of Black and brown women as racial justice warriors. Her most important role is that of a single parent to her daughter. Welcome, Dr. Alana Simmons.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Marisha, for that wonderful introduction. Thank you. Big shout out to my good friend and colleague, Dr. Patricia Gonzalez. We've been friends for the last 4 or 5 years. We actually met while working at Emory and Henry College in Virginia. And a big shout out to Lila, who is going to serve as my producer today, because I was unable to share my screen in Zoom. And so she is going to be sharing my presentation for you. So Lila, I am ready whenever you are. So again, thank you all for joining me on in this conversation today. I hope that it will be interactive. I hope that you will feel the opportunity to either unmute or drop your comments into the chat. I want us to have a really healthy and rich discussion because this probably isn't just my story. There are probably others who are joining us for today's conversation who've experienced this. And I want us to have a holistic remedy and a response to help folks who look like me as we move forward. So Lila, we can go ahead and move to the next slide. So I want to start off with a story, if you will. Oh, we went too far. There you go. I want you to meet Rory. In this picture, Rory is a 7th grader. She's in middle school in Virginia. And so because she's gotten a little mature, she wants to wear her hair a little differently. She decides that she wants to wear her hair natural. She doesn't want to wear the pigtails because that's what little girls like to do. And so she goes to school with this exact hairstyle. She goes into a classroom, and at the first glance, as soon as she sits down, there's a student next to her who grabs her hair. She doesn't ask Rory if she can touch her hair. She just instantly takes the moment to grab her hair. And that made Rory very uncomfortable. And so she told the student, who happened to be a white student, you know, I don't want you playing in my hair. It's my hair, it's my body, don't touch it. And so the little girl laughed at her, and the rest of the friends laughed at her. So Rory did what she had been taught to do. She went and told the teacher, a responsible adult. And the teacher's response was, well, your hair is different. And so they just wanted to see what it felt like. Just go sit down, it'll be okay. So that evening, Rory goes home. She tells her mother what happens. And because her mother has never experienced this before, she really doesn't know how to respond other than to say, well, you know, I'll send the teacher an email and I'll copy the assistant principal just to make sure we have some clarity that you don't want to be touched, that it made you feel very uncomfortable and you did not like it and you do not want it to happen again. So she sends Rory off to school. And for the remainder of that week, this white female student continued to play in Rory's hair. It upset her. She was just so disappointed that, you know, she would tell several teachers, because they shared several classes together, that this is happening and I do not like it. It's a violation on my body. It's an assault. And the teachers continued to laugh her off. Rory even made an effort to go and speak with the assistant principal, who was also a white female, to tell her about it. And again, that assistant principal laughed at her, mocked her, and said, it's okay. You know, your hair is different. People just want to know what that feels like. And so here you have a student who's being touched, whose body is being violated, who hasn't given consent for anyone to touch their body. They've done the right thing. They've told the student not to touch them. They've told a teacher, they've told several teachers, and they've talked to an administrator. Because again, this is her body. If she doesn't want to be touched, that is her absolute right not to be touched. And so Rory decides to take matters into her own hands. And she finds herself on the path to the school to prison pipeline. Because at the end of the week, Rory took an open hand and slapped the student across her shoulder, leaving a very visible handprint. And so we're going to pause right here on Rory's story. We're going to come back to it, but I just want you to sit with that image of a child who's saying, stop, no, don't touch me. This person is touching me, please make it stop. And the behavior just continues until the child who's been victimized decides to take matters into their own hands. We're ready to move, Lila. And so I want you to take a minute or so, and you can close your eyes. If you have your camera on, you can turn your camera off because this may feel weird or awkward. I want you to put your hands on your head, in your hair. You can massage your scalp, you can pull on your tresses, whatever feels good to you. I'm gonna turn my timer on and I'm gonna give you a good solid minute just to go ahead and do that. And again, feel free to turn your camera off. But I want you, as you're doing this, to think about, what does your hair say about you? You've got another 30 seconds. Get in there, feel the scalp, move it around. It may be the first massage that your scalp has had all day. It may help with a migraine, but I just want you to get in there and think about, as you're doing this, what does your hair say about you? All right. And so for those of you who chose to participate in that activity. If you feel comfortable, you can unmute or you can drop into the chat. That 1 minute massage, what does your hair say about you from that 1 minute massage?
My hair says about me that I know better because it's real dry, and I act like I'm not from Ohio and living in Colorado. So I'm gonna call my mama and apologize and then put some oil on it.
All right, Tamara, thank you for sharing. Anyone else?
I'll go and say, my hair says that I am very busy and only have time to wash it a certain number of times. So it needs some work.
Okay, thank you for sharing.
Busy mom,
Marisha.
I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Busy mom.
And then we have in the chat, Jeannie says, I don't like my hair, never have, so I'm not sure what that says, and that's okay. Someone says, I am unique. If someone's agreeing with you, Marisha, that they're saying, me too, I'm a busy mom, I've got things going on. And so I asked you to do that activity because I know in my description, I said we were gonna start with Colonial America, but then I got into the research and I was like, wow, I never knew this about African tribes, right? And so in these pictures here depicted on the screen, these are from the western coast of Africa. And so the hairstyles that these women fashioned, because they spent hours and hours putting their hair together, it could tell you about all of these things here on the right side of the screen. So it could tell you if someone was married, if they were single and maybe not ready to date yet, if they were a widow. It could tell you about their religious affiliation, their ethnic identity, which tribe they belong to, their age, the wealth that they carried, and even their rank. Thank you all for still sharing this information in the chat. I appreciate it. And so I had no idea about this power of Black hair, right? And so I just feel like Black hair is just so magical to be able to walk through a community, walk down the street, and someone can tell these 6 things about me. That's just mind blowing to me, because that's not something I think about when I massage my scalp. I think, man, it's been a long day. Maybe it's time for me to wash my hair. It's time for me to oil my scalp, or how much I miss my mom because she's no longer here. And that was one of the things we did as mother and daughter. She would grease my scalp once a week. And so for other Black women who are on the line, you may resonate with those things as well. But just imagine the power, the magic, and the mythical feeling that your hair, just based on the way that it's styled, could tell someone walking opposite of you or next to you these 6 things about you. And I see a comment from Jay Dyson, I miss my mom greasing my scalp. Absolutely. And so when we tell you that Black hair is magical, it's not a game, right? It's real stuff, and it's rooted in history, and there's so many wonderful things to know and to learn about Black hair. So we're ready to move, Lila. So let's talk about the history of head wraps, and that's going to bring us here into colonial America, recognizing that 1619 is the year in which the first Africans were kidnapped, tortured, and brought here to the shores of Virginia. And so you have folks, like in the previous slide, who had spent their leisure time fashioning their hair, combing and styling their hair, and then they come here and they're forced to endure grueling work conditions against their will. And so you bring someone across the water, right, against their will. They're having to work on plantations, they're having to harvest in very hot, humid conditions that were unlike their homeland. And so you no longer have that beautiful hair that you had when you were in your motherland. And so folks are now figuring out, like, well, we don't have the combs that we used to have. So we have to find alternate ways, whether it's something that's used to shear sheep or to comb sheep out. And so there comes a time where women decide to wear head wraps because they want to protect what they do have left. They want to help with the sweating that's going on. They want to shoo off the insects that are flying around them. But I think what's really interesting is that when enslavers and people in leadership noticed that Black women were wearing head wraps, they wanted to make sure that these women stayed in their place. They wanted to ensure that they knew that they were second-class citizens. They could not wear elaborate fabrics on their hair. And so one of the ways in which these leaders and these enslavers codified that was through the Negro Act of 1735, which was passed in South Carolina, saying that Black women, Negro women could only wear certain types of cloth. So even if you came across a beautiful silk scarf, something with flowers adorning it, Black women weren't allowed to wear that, right? There's something going on in which government decides, we're gonna keep this class of citizens over here to the side. We wanna make sure that, again, they're not getting ahead of themselves, they're not getting too big for their britches, but they remain in the place that we've put them in because they're nothing equivalent to us. And so the same thing happened in the Spanish colony, which is now known as Louisiana, with the Tenon laws of 1786, where, okay, you're gonna wear these head wraps, but they did something specific for Creole women, for biracial women, or even those who were white passing. You know, you've got to wear a headscarf because we need to know that, again, you're going to stay in your place, and we want to make sure that you're not luring these white men because we don't want any more biracial babies. And so you think about the ways in which, again, government is so involved in how Black people, specifically Black women, fashion their hair. There must be something magical about this hair, because I can't think of any other group across the globe, you know, who's created all this, who's garnered all of this attention from government to say, oh, you got to stay over here in your place. You're going to wrap your hair up. It's not going to look anything like it looked when we kidnapped you from your homeland. But now we want to make sure that you're going to stand out, and you're going to stand out in the ways that we allow you to stand out. And so I just want you to kind of sit with this, because folks wear head wraps now, right? And there's a different connotation when Black women wear head wraps, because it's not always welcomed in workplaces, which again, I find funny when the government said, this is what you're going to wear, and this is how you're going to wear it, and this is why you're wearing it. Let's keep moving, Lila. So let's talk about cornrows, right? Got into some of the literature, and you know, I've always heard this folklore about cornrows and why they were so magical and so special. But when you read about how these Black women were saying, you know, we got to send messages. We were doing this in our homeland. Our ancestors were doing this. We're going to keep up this magical story. And so you read about folks who put these messages in cornrows, whether it's telling someone how to escape, where to go when you escape, who to find for resources. I just think that is just so powerful that folks who weren't permitted to read or write, who could only speak when spoken to, found these other ways in which to communicate with folks who were on the same plantation as them. And it makes me think now, like, you know, I cornrow my hair, and sometimes I put a wig on, and sometimes I crochet it like it's like I'm wearing it now. But just to think about how powerful it is, that you can put a message or send a message to someone, you can communicate with someone with something just like cornrows. We're ready, Lila. So we're going to progress on here to the late 1800s, early 20th century. Can anyone tell me who this young Black woman is on the left side of your screen? You can unmute or drop it into the chat. Oh, absolutely. Madam C.J. Walker. She is known as the first Black female self-made millionaire. She's created all of these hair care products. You know, we talk about relaxers and straightening the hair. And so we move from a time period in which folks are wearing their hair natural. They're using cornrows to send messages. And now as we move into the early 20th century, you can see here on the screen, we have women who have either chemically relaxed their hair, or they've used that hot comb. And for those of us on the call, you know, we remember those hot combs from back in the day, early Sunday morning before you go to church. You know, you got to literally sit in the kitchen. Mama or grandmama's going to drop that hot iron on the stove. And if you move or you flinch, you know, you're going to get burned. And then you're probably going to get popped because you moved and then you got burned, right? And so just again, to think about the ways in which our hair is just so magical. That's funny, Jennifer. Don't miss that hot comb at all. Neither do I. And so while some may say, you know, this was a transformation into European hairstyles, no, because Black women, again, our hair could be thick, thin, coarse, wavy, kinky, short. We can rock it bald. And just again, to be able to have all these versatile styles with our hair, it's just magical and powerful to me. We're ready, Lila. And so now let's move into the 1960s and 70s with some of these hairstyles that represented the Black Power movement. And so at this point in time, women were thinking, you know, maybe we're tired of relaxing our hair. It takes a lot, there's a lot of heat, or the chemicals are damaging. And so we're just gonna go back to our braids, which you see Cicely Tyson here on the left side of your screen, and we're gonna rock that afro and be proud like Dr. Angela Davis. And so you think about, in workplaces, this wasn't always an acceptable hairstyle. But again, these hairstyles are telling a story. They're talking about the movement. We don't want to do this. We want to rebel. We want to do what we want to do, whether it's to represent our ancestors or just to rock something that was natural and easy and that felt good. We're ready, Lila. And so we're gonna sit here on this screen for a while. And I think it's really important that we talk about cultural appropriation. And so while there may be some folks who say, well, I don't see anything wrong with Kim K rocking braids or cornrows, or you see Bo Derek here on the very far right of the screen, you know, it doesn't sit well with me. Because when you learn about the history of cornrows and you think about how even in modern times now, Black women, depending on the industry in which they work, these hairstyles are not acceptable. And so when you have a non-Black celebrity rock these hairstyles, you know, in an effort to make it cool, popular and trendy, but they don't know the background, it just doesn't sit well with me. And so you see a lot of times that folks are calling Kim K and other white celebrities out for their use of these cornrows. It's cultural appropriation. You know, it's the same thing with Indigenous populations where folks wear head wraps and headbands. Like, we can't do that. You have to understand why these hairstyles, why these trends exist. And if you don't know why, you shouldn't be rocking them. It's just in poor taste. It's not helpful. It's not an educational moment. It's a moment where someone needs to be told, this is bad, this is in poor taste, and this is why. Because I guarantee you, Kim K doesn't know the history of cornrows. She doesn't know the history of Black hair. She's probably not concerned about Black women working in industries and having to wear their hair in a certain way because it's not an industry standard. And yet to use her celebrity to mock or, you know, in some sense, try to make it trendy or popular for her, it's hurting Black women like myself. And so again, there are going to be some folks that say, well, I don't see an issue with it. I do. I take an issue with it. And I think it's very important that white celebrities, white folks understand the history behind our hair before they try to rock our hair. And again, if you want to sit in those places and culturally appropriate what we're doing, how the lives that we're living, you need to understand the consequences that come along with it. We're ready to move, Lila. And so if you're not familiar with the Crown Act, Creating a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair, this is legislation that initiated in California to ensure that women could wear their hair in any fashion. They could rock their natural hair however they wanted to in workplaces, because again, there are industries across this country that tell Black women how to wear their hair. They tell us that, you know, we look good on paper, we sound good across the screen, but if we come in rocking braids, that's not professional, right? We have to conform to European standards. And so these a great website to check out. I have another slide coming up later in the presentation that will show you some of the states that have enacted legislation to ensure that we Black women can rock our natural hair and still be safe and feel supported in our workplace. You can keep moving, Lila. So let's talk about this picture right here. And so there's a video, and I refuse to upload the video for very good reason. And so if you don't know about this image, this is where a Black reporter is at the Georgia National Fair in Perry, and she's talking with an animal handler about what's coming up, about their exhibits at the fair. And so you can see the lemur on the left side of the page, left side of the screen, is on top of her head. And he's playing around, having a good old time. And she's still carrying out her conversation with the animal handler. And then on the right side of the screen, you can see that her wig, that the lemur has removed her wig. And so when I first saw this video, I was absolutely mortified for her because of what had happened to her. And she's in an industry, she's in broadcasting, where Black women are not permitted to wear their natural hair on screen. You would be hard pressed to find a Black woman rocking her natural hair on screen and broadcasting, unless she's in one of the states protected by the Crown Act. And so this video was shared multiple times across social media, and folks who look like me were just having a good time laughing. I couldn't laugh at this. This is someone who looks like me, who's forced to wear her hair in a manner that's not her own style, because she has to submit to industry standards in order to keep her job. So you can tell that she has hair, it's cornrowed down, but in order for her to work, she has to submit to a certain standard. And so there's some folks on the call who probably recognize this young lady because she is the chief meteorologist at WALB here in my hometown of Albany, Georgia. We go to the same hair salon, we sit in there and we chit chat. And while she was still able to maintain her professional composure on screen, I know she was mortified. And I was just horrified that this happened to her and that folks who look like me just thought it was hilarious. But when you get the backstory and you understand that, Black women have to submit to European standards to work in broadcasting in certain areas of the country, then you get that greater understanding of why this is not so funny. And I also point to the headline of this particular article: reporter gets her wig snatched, right? So this AAVE vernacular there. People talk about getting snatched, like, I'm gonna wear a waist trainer, I'm gonna get snatched, or I'm gonna snatch my face with makeup. But here we're using that verbiage to talk about a Black woman who was humiliated while doing her job on live TV. And so I want you to kind of sit with that and think about what would have been the outcome had she looked like anyone else other than herself. Let's keep moving on. And so let's talk, we've talked a lot bit about the history. So let's go back to this piece of touching and wanting to grab Black hair. So let's talk about some pitfalls. And so before I discuss what I'm going to share with you, I would love for you to kind of drop in the chat, how do we avoid these pitfalls of folks wanting to touch Black hair? How do we do that? Or you can unmute.
I think one of the biggest thing is just don't do it, right? Like why, like the Rory story that you share, it's someone's body. Why would you dare touch someone's body? And the other thing is education, right? So some folks, you mentioned earlier, like the little girl was just curious, according to the staff. The reality is we need to educate our children, our folks, being in this space today shows a lot for a lot of the folks that are here to learn, but truly just don't do it, right? It's someone's body. It's a violation of someone's body, their body. And so thank you for sharing that story at the beginning.
Oh, absolutely. Great information coming through the chat. So I'm just going to hop in because I want to make sure I'm respectful of your time today. Let's talk about consent. Right? We typically talk about consent when it comes to engaging in sexual activity, but consent is about anything, right? So I'll give you an example. I have rough elbows. You can't tell because I have on a long sleeve dress, but if I saw someone with smooth elbows and I walked up to them and just grabbed their elbow, how weird would that be, right? You'd be looking at me like I had 5 heads and it just dropped out of the sky. And so we have to respect Black hair in the same manner. It may look cool, it may have a nice color, it might have a sheen to it, whatever it looks like, you still have to ask consent. You just don't walk up to people and just touch them, because that can be seen as an assault, because you don't know how that other person is going to respond. And then you're going to be sitting there looking like, well, what did I do wrong? Because you just don't walk up to folks and do it. It's just a bad idea. So consent, if anything, if you don't remember anything else from this conversation, think about consent. I have to ask before I touch someone's person, right? Beauty supply store. When I go get my hair done, I'm going to the beauty supply store. There are braids in there, there are wigs in there, even Afro wigs. If you want to go see what Black hair feels like, walk into a beauty supply store. And if it feels weird to ask an employee, you know, can I touch this Afro? It's probably weird to say that to us, right? Moving on. Oh, I see a comment, a question in the chat. What do you think? We're going to get to that, Tanya, so hold on to that. So we've talked about consent. We've talked about the beauty supply store. Let's talk about the zoo. If you see a very unique animal at the zoo, it's in a cage, or even if it was just walking around, would you just walk up to it and touch it? Probably not. You'd probably ask an animal handler, hey, is it okay to put my hand out to feed this particular animal? Can I rub its head, its skin, its fur, whatever? But if there's a sign that says don't touch, don't touch, right? So I want you to think of it in perspective as that we're not at the zoo. Black people, we are not the zoo. You've not paid an admission fee to come in and talk to us any kind of way and touch our hair. Again, unless you ask and we give you that permission. And then the last way to avoid that pitfall, just don't do it. Just admire it from afar and say, wow, that is just such a beautiful hairstyle. I love it. I wish I could do something like that on my scalp, but my hair is not gonna cooperate, or I know better, because that would be cultural appropriation. Just don't do it. All right, let's move on, Lila. And so what does advocacy look like to you? And so we have a great question from Tanya. What do you think is a way to be a good bystander if you witness someone fetishizing a Black person's hair or body in real time? If it's someone you know and you feel comfortable talking to them, just let them know, you know, this is not appropriate. This is a human being. We need to humanize everyone, not the folks who just look like us. This is their body. They don't want to be touched. You have no business touching them. We don't tolerate that in our space, right? Because if we saw someone kicking an animal or leaving an animal locked up in a car, right, we're going to call the police. We're going to call 911. We're going, you know, wild to make sure that this animal is protected. Well, we're not animals, but we're humans, and we need to be protected as well. So I think that's a really great question, Tanya. Thank you so much for putting that forth. Does anyone else have some ideas about what advocacy looks like to you? And again, feel free to drop it in the chat, or you can unmute.
Hi there. I think advocacy could come in many forms, as you've said. We can ask someone to stop, but I think conversations do really go a long way with our friends of color, but also with our, you know, as a Hispanic male, having these conversations with our Caucasian and white friends as well. You know, deep, insightful conversations.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing, Orlando. Again, we have to have these conversations. Sometimes people do things because we don't know. Right? I made a U-turn a couple of days ago in a city where I don't live, and I didn't know you couldn't make U-turns in the middle of the street. Well, you know, the police pulled me over and they talked to me about it. And I said, I didn't know. They gave me a warning, but they didn't have to, right? And so it's important that when we see things that don't appear to be right, things that just seem to be off, speak up and say something. Talking to the person who may have been offended. Hey, are you okay? I saw what happened. That didn't look good. What can I do to help you in this moment? Right? Because that individual may be shocked, they may be terrified, they don't know how to respond. And so just you being the bystander to say, what can I do to help you? Listening to folks. When someone tells you, hey, so-and-so was playing in my hair and I didn't like it, it's not your business to say, get over it, right? It's our business to say, what can I do to help? I'm listening. What can I do to kind of step in? So before we move forward, does anyone else want to drop in some advocacy tips that you think might work? All right, well, we will move on. We're ready to move, Lila. And so I referenced this map here earlier. This is from the crownact.com website. And so you can kind of take a look to see based on where you're residing now, where you're from, whether your entire state has enacted legislation for the Crown Act, or whether there are certain cities. So I'm here in Georgia, and all of the little blue dots there are in the metro Atlanta area. So Clayton County, East Point, Gwinnett County, South Fulton, and Stockbridge. And so Georgia has a long way to go. Looking at Colorado, right? The Crown Act is law. So that is great things. Those are great things that you all are doing in Colorado. And so again, you can find this on the crownact.com just to kind of keep abreast of which states or cities have enacted legislation to protect Black hair. Let's move, Lila. And so we're going to come back to Rory. What did advocacy look like, Rory? Well, after she hit the young girl or slapped her across the arm, the assistant principal called her mom and said, you know, we're going to have to suspend her from school for 3 days. We're going to remove her from the 3 classes that she shares with the other student. We're going to remove her from band. We're going to suspend her from athletics. And she's going to have to issue a public apology. And so this was the opportunity for Rory's mom to use her voice to say, no, that's not what we're going to do. We're going to talk about how her body was violated and how several teachers and administration stood by and laughed and mocked her for reporting it. And so from there, because she still didn't get any resolution with the assistant principal or the principal, her mom made a visit to the superintendent. And again, he was kind of hesitant to say anything or dole out any discipline to the teachers or to the principals for their failures to protect Rory. And so her mom joined an organization called Virginia Organizing, grassroots organization in Virginia that empowers people in the communities to address issues that impact them the most. And so after Rory's mom spoke with other families in the school system who had been impacted, not only because of their skin color, but because of their gender identity, their sexual identity, their ableism, all of these parents banded together and did a thorough search of the school system's anti-discrimination statement, and noticed that there were several gaps, right? There were certain groups left out of the anti-discrimination statement. There was no clear protocol on how to report it. There was no one who was actually in charge of responding to these complaints. And so they drafted some policy that would help guide the school system on how to address these issues. They took it before the school board, and there were a couple of school board members that laughed at these parents, but guess what? The laugh was on them, because the ultimatum was, you're either going to take action and implement this, review it, implement it, adapt it, adopt it, or we're going to take action and remove you from your school board seat. And so once folks started to hear that, they started to understand, like, this is necessary. We have issues in the schools because we have students that we are here to serve who don't feel safe when they come to school, right? And so it's more than someone touching Rory's hair. There are students, there's a wide swath of students who did not feel protected at school. And so to be an educator, to be an administrator, to be a superintendent, to be a school board member, and to hear those stories, countless stories, not just from Black parents, but from white parents, Latino parents, you got to understand that there's a greater issue. when these students are reporting these incidents and they have to take it into their own hands, they're being criminalized, right? The SROs, the school resource officers, are coming for them first. That's impacting their education. The fact that Rory could have been removed from these classes would have impacted her college preparation, her college prep track. And so because her mother spoke up and said, absolutely not, I'm going to make noise. I'm going to make noise that you don't like, and I'm going to keep making it until you don't like it anymore, until you make some changes. That was the only way that her mom was able to advocate for her. So in the picture on the right, you see Rory, happy, smiling child. She is now working on her second semester of her first year at Valdosta State University. And if you have not picked up on it by now, that is me in the picture, and Rory is my child. We can move forward to the next slide. And so I want to thank you today for giving up your lunch hour, your break to kind of hang out with us. Here's some of the references that I used for today's presentation. I just want to point out that the first book here that you see by Yana Bird and Lori Tharps, Untangling the Roots of Black Hair in America, that is a powerful read. Even though it was published in 2002, it still has so much historical context. And so I encourage you to take a screenshot of this page. If not, of course, it'll be in the recording. But a lot of history behind this magical, mythical hair that I have coming from my scalp. We can move on to the next page. And so as I close out most of my presentations or trainings, I always talk about self-care for everybody, but especially for Black women. It is radical and it is much needed. So here is what I am currently reading, a memoir by Kiese Layman entitled Heavy. I've got some upcoming travel. I'll be cruising to the Bahamas at the end of this month and going to Colombia next month. I'm currently watching the 1619 Project. Of course, it is based on the book by Nicole Hannah-Jones on Hulu. I encourage you to be in a really good place when you start this journey, watching the documentary. Take breaks as you need, write notes, journal, cry, drink tea, because it's really heavy. But again, it's a historical context that we all need to be abreast of. And then every now and then, I like to watch a little trash TV because watching the news can just be so heavy. And so I am currently watching The Real Housewives of Potomac. If you are watching it, do not drop any spoilers in the chat. I have not watched last week's episode yet. So we can go to the next slide. And so again, thank you. Are there any questions, comments, burning concerns that you want to share?
Dr. Simmons, Lila and I are gonna help you out with the questions in the chat.
Okay.
Amanda said, I am learning so much. Thank you, Dr. Simmons, and everyone who has shared. What is appropriate regarding complimenting Black hair? Wondering how to convey kindness and admiration and not cause harm.
So my opinion on that would be, Amanda, just to say, you know what, I love your hair. That is just so beautiful. And then give that other person time to respond, because likely we're going to say, you know, girl, I had to sit in the chair for a couple of hours. There was a lot involved. But you can just say, I really love that. Really love that style that you're rocking.
Anyone has more? Okay, let's see. We have a second one from Erica asking, how can white people stand up without taking over or dominating the conversation?
So Erica, if you see that happening and the person who's being offended is still there, just walk up to them and say, you know, I just observed what happened to you. I want to make sure you're okay. Is there something I can do? And let that person guide you on how to respond. Because I can understand how you don't want to come in and be seen as the white savior, but you certainly want to be able to listen and ask them, what can I do to help? And certainly let that individual just kind of help you navigate how to best respond for them, because their answer may be, you know, I don't want to discuss it. I'm going to leave it alone. I don't want to address it. But someone else may come back around and say, you know, we need to go talk to someone in the diversity and inclusion office. We need to have a conversation with the dean. We need to do a teach-in. But again, just let that person guide you on how to help them navigate that. It's a really good question. Thank you for asking.
I have a question. I guess it's in regards to our subject matter. But I recently took over as director of marketing and engagement for a chain of hair salons here in the Denver area. And one of our mission statements this year is to include a lot more DE&I in our corporate partnerships, as well as our community outreach opportunities. Do you by chance happen to have any connections in the Denver area? Because it is Black History Month, and I just took over a couple of weeks ago, and I want to create at least a conversation around Black hair and Black beauty, but it seems like no one's responding. But if you had any connections, I'd greatly appreciate it either in the chat or via email.
It sounds like you're doing great work, Orlando, and thank you for being so open, trying to seek resources. If you all have not picked up on it by now, I'm in the South. I've got my drawl going on today. I'm in Georgia, but certainly Dr. Gonzalez, Marisha, or Lala can probably best help direct you to some resources in the Denver area.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're
And
welcome.
I would say, Orlando, that Dr. Simmons is also another resource, right? Amplifying her message and making sure we can connect you to her as well. If you would like to bring her over to Denver, we would love to have her here.
Yeah, no, that would be great. Either we can bring her over or we can do something similar to this where we have, in location sort of Zoom feed where, we have the opportunity to hear her, but also ask appropriate questions for her.
Outstanding.
So I'm looking at the time, but just want to add that Dr. Simmons will be hanging out with us afterwards for a few minutes. Before you leave, we want to share our Jedi Office survey. Please do take the survey. Let us know your feedback. Dr. Simmons will love some feedback as well. And also our YouTube channel, we will share that link with you all in an email afterwards, but we will upload Dr. Simmons' talk so that you're sharing it with colleagues, friends, family members, whoever you feel like can benefit from this talk. I want to thank you, Dr. Simmons, for being honest, for being transparent, and for always reminding us of the importance of supporting and advocating for one another. Thank you for just being you and for being present with CU Boulder faculty and staff and community members. So thank you again. I also want to invite you all to our next events, our upcoming events celebrating Black History Month. Next, on February 8th, we have Peter Stevenson, who's going to be talking about the state of fitness in Black America. We invite you all to come. Anyone's welcome. Lila and Marisha will be adding these links to the chat. And then on the February 9th, we have the viewing of This Is Who We Are. It is free. It will be on campus. So please do take advantage of that so you can learn more about the history of Boulder and how it was created. And then also reinventing yourself when all fails. What is your plan C? This is a great opportunity for faculty, staff, and students to have a conversation about what would it look like for me to think of a plan C when A and B fails. Another thing I want to acknowledge is CAUSE, our Center for African American and Studies has opened today. So today's the day. If you have not registered, please do register and attend. It will be at the Mackey Auditorium, and this will be open to anyone. So it's from 3:30 to 6 p.m. There will be performances, and of course the opening of the center that has existed for almost over a year, but it is now open to everyone. And then if you're a faculty and staff member, just remember that the impact grants proposals are coming up. The applications are due February 13th, and this is for the upcoming academic year. And then the last thing, if you're supporting students, faculty, staff, or you're a graduate student, professional student, the Basics Needs Center is opening. They're doing an open house today, February 2nd from 11 to 4 p.m. If you want to learn more about the Basic Needs Centers, please do reach out. So we're going to use these last 6 minutes to stop the recording. And if anyone wants to hang out with Dr. Simmons, you're welcome to. Thank you, everyone, for being here today.